Hello there, and welcome to your Danish class. Today is going to be a bit of a different lesson. It's going to be a history lesson / Danish lesson. We are going to explore the time of the Vikings. Who were they and how did they live and what did they do? So if you don't know anything about the Vikings, they were famous for their seafaring and raidings across Europe especially. They were people from Scandinavia, mainly Norway, Denmark, and Sweden. So let's grab a piece of paper and a pencil and let's write some words together that all have to do with the Viking era and Nordic mythology. So first, let's write. I'll just put on my glasses here and write Langskib, Langskib, longship, Langskib, 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 which means longship. And these incredible ships were designed to be able to travel really, really far. And they allowed the Vikings to travel as far as Asia and North America, amongst other places. And they were very narrow, so they could also travel through rivers. And these amazing longships were often decorated with terrifying animal heads on the front of the ships to seem intimidating and terrifying. They were used for raids around Europe, but also for trade and exploration in general. So that was Langskib. And next, Runesten. In Runesten. Runestone. Runesten. Runesten. Yeah. In Runesten. Runestone. Runestones were raised stones carved to honor dead relatives or important events. And runes, of course, are the writing system that was used during the Viking Age in Scandinavia, or parts of Scandinavia. So, next word is langhus, 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 longhouse, langhus. Langhus, langhus. So I will put all the words here in the description so that you can write them, and I will also write a little explanation of what these words mean in the description so that you can keep it and have that knowledge for yourself. Yeah. So langhus, langhus. Viking families lived in long houses that often housed both people and animals. Very practical way for farmers to live and be self-sufficient with both animals and big families all gathered. And let's take the next word, bonde, bonde, a farmer, bonde, B-O-N-D-E, bonde. Now, you might think of the Vikings as brutal warrior types that raved all around Europe, but the fact is that most people by far were just simple farmers going about their daily lives. Yeah. And next, handel, trade, handel. Trade connected the Vikings with Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia. They also got all the way to the Middle East in their famous longships. And silver, silver, Yeah, I'll just show you all the words here so you can write them down. Yeah, silver. Silver was a key material used for payment, jewelry, and wealth storage. Yes. And you can still find, if you ever come to Denmark and you want to take home a souvenir, you can often find these replicas of these interesting finds from the Viking Age, Viking jewelry. I remember my mom has some of those. Not my personal taste, but gold, G-U-L-D, Gold was rare but highly valued and often used in elite jewelry and treasures. Yeah. And next we have Købstad, trading town. Købstad, trading town. Købstad, trading town. Yes. Købstad. Trading towns like Hedeby were important centers for commerce. So the Vikings were not just brutal warriors going on raids. They were also very good and clever traders. And they traded a lot with other parts of Northern Europe and influenced a lot of Northern Europe, both in language and traditions. Skjold, a shield. Skjold. S-K-J-O-L-D. Skjold. A shield. Yes. Skjold. Viking shields were usually round and made of wood, with a metal boss in the center. Yes, and you will still find lots of these treasures in museums all over the country, I believe. There's a special Viking museum I believe it is in Roskilde, if I'm not mistaken. You can correct me in the comments if you know better. I don't know it on the top of my head right now. I can't remember it. But I mentioned it in my other video, the Denmark tour, where I talk about all the different regions of Denmark. Yeah. Well, so let's move on to the next word. Hjelm, helmet, a helmet. Hjelm. H-J-E-L-M, hjelm. Helmet. helmet. Hjelm. Yeah. Archaeological evidence shows Viking helmets were typically simple and hornless. Yeah. The part about the horns, it's kind of a myth. It's not real. So many people think that there were horns in the helmets, but there wasn't, according to archaeological finds. So let's move on to Svea. Svea. Sword. Svea. S-V-E-R-D. Svea. Sword. Yeah, a sword. Swords were expensive weapons often owned by wealthier Viking warriors. And next, yxe. Axe. Yxe. U-K-S-E. Yxe. An axe. A-X-E. Axe. Yxe. Axe. Axes were common weapons and also important tools in daily Viking life. Yeah, and they still are. To chop wood, Yeah. Oh yeah, got probably more useful back then. I don't have an axe myself. Next, we have spyd. A spear. Spyd. S-P-Y-D. Spyd. A spear. S-P-E-A-R. Spear. A spear. Spears were the most widely used weapon in Viking warfare. So, we will now take a new piece of, return this paper. Take a new piece of paper and write some more. Yeah. So next, sail. Almost the same, just with an E and a J. S-E-J-L, sail. A sail. S-A-I-L in English. Sail. Sail. Viking ships used large wool sails to travel long distances. Wow, I didn't know they were made of wool. Yeah, they were not stupid, those Vikings. Very clever. And let's see, oar, like to sail with, yeah. Oar. O-A-R, oar. Oars were used to row ships when there was no wind or in rivers. And next, root. Yeah, root. Vikings used sea and river routes that connected Scandinavia with Europe and beyond. And next, Gud. God. Gud. Or should you say gods? Because there were several. Gud. G-U-D. Gud. God. Norse gods were central to Viking religion and mythology. Very, very fascinating. We can get a lot more into Nordic mythology, but here today we will just go over the most significant things. There's a lot to go into there. So first, let's take Odin. Odin was associated with wisdom, war, and magic in Norse mythology. So Odin. Yeah, and that's the same in English, of course. And the next god is Thor. Thor. We call him Thor. Yeah, Thor. Odin, oh Thor. Thor is what you would call him in English. And he has, of course, given name to the weekday Thursday. Yeah, Thor's day. Torsdag. Thor. Thor was the god associated with thunder and protection of humans. And next we have Freya. Freya. The god Freya, female goddess, yes. Freya. Freja. Freya. And Freya was the goddess associated with love, fertility, and war. And then we have Skell. S-K-A-L-D, Skell. S-K-A-L-D, Skell. Skells were poets who composed stories about kings, heroes, and gods. So, a form of writer. Skells. Yeah. S-K-A-L-D, Skell. Yeah. Which probably are responsible for many of the stories that have been passed on through generations. And next word is gravhøj. A burial mound. Gravhøj. 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 A burial mound. Yes. Burial mound. Gravhøj. Burial mound. Yeah. And now let's just take a little bit of time to talk about the Nordic mythology. What did the Vikings believe in? The Vikings believed the world was connected by the world tree Yggdrasil. They believed that warriors who died in battle would go to Valhalla, Odin's hall. Others might go to Folkvangar, a realm ruled by Freya. They also believed in fate, called Vyrd, meaning that life was partly predetermined. Religion was not separate from daily life. People made offerings, prayed before journeys, and used myths to explain nature and fate. And what did the Vikings actually do on their longship voyages? Viking longships were used for many purposes, not just raids, as many people think. They traveled to exchange goods like furs, silver, glass, and textiles. Vikings reached Iceland, Greenland, and even North America. some groups moved to new lands and established farms. Some voyages involved attacking monasteries, towns, or coastal settlements. On raids, specifically, Vikings would often strike quickly and leave before a strong defense could form. They targeted places with wealth that were poorly defended, such as monasteries. They took valuables, food, and sometimes captives. Raids were usually seasonal and not the only Viking activity, such as many people might think. They are often compared to pirates because they used ships to attack coastal targets and they took goods by force during raids. But the comparison is incomplete because Vikings were also farmers, traders, and settlers, not full-time raiders. And they were not just mindless barbarians. Their societies was structured with laws, assemblies, tings, and today we call it actually Folketing, and settlements. So a more accurate description is Vikings were seafaring people who sometimes engaged in raiding, but also in trade, farming, and exploration. And here are some common myths about the Vikings, and then the truth, of course. So the first popular myth is that Vikings wore horns on their helmets. No archaeological evidence shows horned battle helmets. This idea comes from later art and opera costumes. And myth number 2, all Vikings were violent warriors. This is false. Most Vikings were farmers and only some took part in raids. And number 3, Vikings were dirty and uncivilized. This is also false. Vikings practiced grooming, combing hair, and had well-organized settlements. And myth number 4, Vikings were a single nation. This is also false. They were groups from Scandinavia, Denmark, Norway, Sweden. Not one unified country. And the 5th myth is that Vikings disappeared suddenly. This is also false. Viking culture gradually changed as Scandinavia became Christian and more centralized kingdoms formed. Yes, and that is all for today. And let me know, please, if you liked this unique kind of lesson, both a Danish lesson and a bit of a historical lesson. If you do, I will gladly make this into a series of videos where we explore Danish history altogether. So, have a wonderful rest of the day, have a wonderful sleep, and I'll see you again in my next video very, very soon.